And notice this very important point. Slavery was voluntary. Voluntary. A person would voluntarily sell himself into slavery. He could not, as an Israelite, be forced into slavery against his will. So Old Testament slavery is not the same as Old South slavery, even on the surface of it. But there's more. Slaves in the Old Testament had legal protection. Remember, a slave would sell himself into this condition in order to escape from economic ruin. As a slave, he had an opportunity to pay off his debts. He had free lodging with his master. He was protected. He became a member of the household for a while. He even became very fond of his master and became part of his family. And that brings us to Exodus 21, which is the passage that President Bartlett, that fictional character in the West Wing, quoted. Turn to Exodus 21. Verse 7. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these three things unto her, then shall she go out free without money. It's not simply the case here the man decides to sell his daughter into slavery. Rather, this was a way in which a man who had very little money was able to provide for his daughter a rich husband and a good future. Remember, in these days, in the Old Testament, the husband of a daughter was determined by the father. And usually, when you are giving your daughter to another man, you have to give a dowry, which is a sum of money, a gift. If you have no money to pay this dowry, you could instead sell your daughter to the man, who would become, this woman would then become the slave, the servant of this man, instead of paying a dowry. But notice that God's law gives all kinds of protections to such a woman. Because this is really a form of betrothal. It says in verse 8, if she please not her master who hath betrothed her to himself. Or verse 9, betrothed her unto his son. He may not then simply chuck her out on the street, destitute, with no money and with no future. He has to provide for her, verse 10 says, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage. And thus he cannot deal with her deceitfully and treacherously and treat her as if she were a piece of meat. That's the reason for Exodus 21. It's not that a man says, oh, I'd love to sell my daughter into slavery to the Egyptians and get maybe lots of money for her. That's not at all what the passage means in its context. The law, moreover, forbade the ill treatment of slaves. Kidnapping, forced enslavement of one's fellow Israelite was punishable by death. Exodus 21, verse 16. And he that stealeth a man, and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Deuteronomy 24, verse 7. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren, of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of them, or selleth them for him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. Harsh treatment of slaves was forbidden as well. Again and again in the Old Testament, God says, thou shalt not treat them or rule over them with rigor. Why? Because that's the way the Egyptians had ruled over Israel when they were slaves. You can look up Leviticus 25, 43, and 53. Slaves had the same legal protection under the law from abuse as common citizens had. You could not simply smite them or hit them or beat them to a pulp because you did not like them anymore. You do not to a common Israelite on the street. Look at Exodus 21. Exodus 21, verse 18. And if men strive together, and one smite another with a stone or with his fist, and he die not, but keepeth his dead, if he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then shall he that smote him be quit, only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. In modern parlance, that means if you assault someone, you have to pay for his loss of earnings and his medical expenses. Right? What about a servant? Verse 20. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. The idea there is the loss of earnings don't count because the man, the slave, belongs to his master, and his time belongs to his master because this man has sold himself into slavery to pay his master in terms of working for him for a certain period of time. But he still had to pay reparations if there were injuries. Look at verse 26. And if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. So there was not much of an incentive to hit your slave in the face, because you would have to lose your slave even if you broke his or her tooth. Moreover, if a slave were to run away, presumably because of the master's cruelty, that slave could not be sent back against his will. Deuteronomy 23. Verse 15. Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. He shall dwell with thee, even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best. Thou shalt not oppress him. And slaves, like everyone else in the land of Israel, were exempt from working on the Sabbath day and on the religious feast days. A far cry, I remind you, from this old South slavery of which we read in the history books. Moreover, freedom was relatively easy to attain unto. All Hebrew slaves had to be released after 6 years, because the 7th year was the year of release. And notice how they were released. Deuteronomy 15 tells us. Verse 12. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and served thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing today. Could you imagine the slave owners of the Old South, after 6 years of faithful service, sending off their slaves with liberal gifts from their fields and their vineyards and their cattle and their herds? Of course not. It's not even comparable. But the idea is, the Bible, it condones slavery. At any time, any one of the slave's relatives could redeem him or her with money, and he or she could do the same if he or she had the means to do so. Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25, verse 47. And if a sojourner or stranger wax rich by thee, and thy brother that dwelleth by him wax poor, and sell himself unto the stranger or sojourner by thee, or to a stock of the stranger's family, after that he is sold, he may be redeemed again. One of his brethren may redeem him, or buy him back. Either his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him, or any that is nigh of kin unto him of his family may redeem him, or he, if he be able, may redeem himself. And in fact, a man could have such a happy life as a slave in Israel, imagine this, that after 6 years of faithful service, and having the option of being free, he could say, no, I love my master so much, I want to stay with him forever. Deuteronomy chapter 15. Verse 16. And it shall be, if he say unto thee, I will not go away from thee, because he loveth thee, and thine house, because it is well with him. Imagine that. A slave who says, I love you, my master, I love your house, it is well with me in your house. Then what happens? Verse 17. Then thou shalt take an awl and thrust it through his ear unto the door, and he shall be thy servant forever, and also unto thy maidservant thou shalt do likewise.